We welcome you in the Sam and Cole podcast, brought to you, as always, by our friends at Champion Cycling. 3 locations. Sam?
Arlington, the Beach, and Mandarin.
There you go. Stop on
All
in.
3 spots, exactly.
And, all right, here we go. Jaguars lose in Tampa. It's the one game people were circling on the calendar, on the schedule to say, well, okay, this is one they should get. Maybe the only one that says a should get on their on the calendar as it stands right now, and they didn't get it. So you were down there in Tampa. I watched on television here in Jacksonville, and this, to me, felt like a defining game. And I'll tell you why. If you think of the defining game, some defining games in Jaguars history, remember the game at the end of Tom Coughlin's tenure against the Browns with a kind of a Hail Mary win at the end by Cleveland. That was a defining game. You think of the game early in a season when it was against the Cardinals and nobody was there. That was a defining game, and that sort of turning point of the of everything with the Jaguars organization. This seemed to be a defining game because you've got Blake Bortles showing that he has taken that next step. Again, he's had more good games than bad. This was his best game of the season, statistically speaking. You had a team with a rookie quarterback who hadn't won at home since the Kennedy administration. And the Jaguars, I mean, the way that it went, they're down, they come back, and then they find ways to hand the game back to Tampa. And not just what happened on the field, but also I'm sitting there watching it with a friend of mine who is I've told you about this guy before. He rarely goes to Jaguars games, but he never misses one on TV. He's just, he's the least favorite kind of fan for some in the Jaguars organization because he doesn't put any money into the ticker, but he's invested in it. And he turned to me at one point, he said, I've gotten to the point where I no longer watch Jaguars games hoping for a win. I just want something visually entertaining. And at that point, the Tampa running back Sims came down the near side and kind of did a headfirst dive, tried to get to the end, but didn't quite get there. He goes, well, that was cool. At least there was something cool to see. And and the response on social media has been much this way. And Gus Bradley's post-game comments, a different Gus Bradley than we've seen. I just think this is the game that we'll look back on and say, well, that's when it ended.
Well, I can tell you that the folks in Tampa also had this game circled as the game that this was a win. This was their winnable game. This was we can get that one. And with a rookie quarterback, you would have expected the Jaguars to force some turnovers, and you would have expected some things to have gone the Jaguars' way. And you say that, and Branch Rickey once said, and it's one of my favorite quotes: "Luck is the residue of design." You make your own breaks. Mm-hmm. Maybe the turning point in the game was when the officials ruled that Winston was down before that ball went out, and it was the right call. It was a right call. Yeah, it was a right call. But that was the turnover you're kind of looking for. Jaguars had regained the momentum and taken the lead, and now if they get that ball, then they probably go down and score again, demoralizes the Bucs, and maybe the Jaguars get the win. But it goes the other way, and it goes fundamentally wrong. To me, that was the issue. And I think there's plenty, if you want to play the blame game, I think there's plenty of blame to pass around. The defense gave up 4.6 yards per carry. I mean, this is where they were supposed to be hanging their hat, was stopping the run, and they just were gashed. And I would hope not to say that they miss Paul Posluszny that much, but it's pretty clear they do. And Jonathan Cyprien is playing himself right out of any sort of hierarchy of guys that you feel like, okay, that guy's going to be our strong safety for 10 years. Yeah. Because between he and Sergio Brown, you could feel the whiffs in the press box. I mean, they just out and out whiffed on these guys. I think Telvin Smith is a good player, but not great. And you could see when he gets trapped inside, he does have unbelievable speed. It's like somebody hits the X button when he runs guys down. And I think that, and that's obviously a plus. But at the same time, a couple times he got caught inside, and that's why the play was able to get on the outside. There were just so many fundamental mistakes that I think that you can look around and ask about the coaching staff. And even Gus Bradley said, look, maybe there's a difference between being ready and being prepared. He said, because clearly that team was not as prepared as they should have been to play this game, because the expectations that were in that locker room were not met. And having said that, eventually players got to play and players got to make plays. And in situations where the Jaguars had a chance to make plays, 3rd and 15, they give up 56 yards on a little middle screen. Those are the kinds of plays that do define a game. But I also think who put Corey Grant in the game in the 4th quarter in that situation? And Gus was asked the question, was he in the game because Yeldon was hurt? And he said, no, we had some plays for Corey this week. Well, you know what? In the 4th quarter with the lead on your own 10-yard line is not the time to try some plays. That's the time to get your best players in the game, and because they understand the magnitude of the situation and the precision and consistency, that, to use their words, that are necessary to win games in the National Football League. And you can't play like you played in college because you were overwhelmingly a better athlete or a better team than the other team, because when you make one mistake, the other team is going to take advantage of it at this level, and the Jaguars are paying that price dearly.
There were 2 things that I tweeted out in the course of the game that I just want to bring up here. One is fairly early in the game, I tweeted out, if not today, then when? Mm-hmm. In other words, if the Jaguars aren't going to show up and play and win today, when is it going to happen? And then later in the game, and I think this gets to the real crux of the big picture here, is, Jacksonville deserves better. The fans, there were thousands of Jaguars fans that trekked down there, Bold City Brigade and other fans who went down there. It has been too long.
By the way, maybe as many as 8,000.
Yeah. So here are Jaguars fans going down there who have decided that they are Jaguars fans, first of all, that they're willing to invest time and money in addition to emotion into a team. And you go down again, a game you think you have a very good chance of winning. And you look at the final score as a 1-touchdown game, but it was not that close. They scored the late touchdown and then the onside kick failed. It wasn't one of those games that was, hey, Tampa scores a late touchdown to win. The Jaguars made it cosmetic at the end. And it wasn't, there was nothing good. Again, I think Bortles, I don't know if he played as well as his numbers, but he played pretty well. He certainly played. If Bortles plays that way every game, you're pleased with his progress.
Right. That's right.
And, it's Hearns had some decent numbers. It's clear that he's become a comfortable target for Bortles. Julius Thomas got in the game, made a couple of catches. Okay, got him back on the field. That's good. Allen Robinson, who I'm still not sure. I think he's diving at balls too much, by the way, on some of those deep balls. I like to see him just keep running because he's, I appreciate the effort and I think he's been good, but he's just not quite.
The one deep ball he might have been able to run under.
Might have been run under. The second one, I think he had to die. I think it was an overthrow, but it's not working. And you can talk about the fundamentals or you can talk about the preparation, but I want to keep it on a little higher level. And it's a storyline you and I have talked about going back to really 2 years ago when Gus Bradley arrived and started not last season, prior season, and his approach. And I don't think his approach works with a young team. I think his approach could work in the NFL with a veteran team that had a bunch of Puz Lesnies on the team and a bunch of Julius Thomases and, even young guys who play like veterans, like Brandon Linder, who's out for the season now. But I don't think this approach works in the NFL. And it certainly isn't working right now when you look at the track record. And here's a team now 1-4 who, again, I'm not saying they won't win another game, but where is the win on the, where's the win on the schedule?
Right.
Where's the next win?
Well, you before the season started, you never thought that they were going to beat the Dolphins either. I think you're exactly.
What happens? You lose to the Jaguars, you fire your coach, and that's just
exactly. I think it's interesting that you said that Jaguar fans deserve better, and if you're a Jaguars fan, you have some real staying power, because when you look at the body of work of the franchise, there is now a whole generation of Jaguar fans who barely know a team that has a winning record. In 6 of their 20 seasons, the Jaguars have had a winning record. 6. 4 of those came before the year 2000. I mean, we're talking about a whole generation of fans who have been watching the game, who saw the Jaguars have a winning season in 2004 when they went 9-7 and didn't make the playoffs. The next year they went 12-4 and they lost the next week to the Patriots in the wild card. And then 2 years after that they went 11-5, and that was the year that they beat the Steelers and then lost to the Patriots up there. But you're not talking about a franchise that has historically won games or been competitive or whatever. Since the year 2000, they have had 3 winning seasons. And and that's just unbelievable loyalty for people to shell their money out to an organization that has not been able to produce that.
It's interesting too with the Bold City Brigade part of that, Sam. You've got, I think the loyalty is to standing up for the city, standing up for Jacksonville's reputation, standing up for this, the 904 or Duval or whatever you want to say. That's what they're. And when I tweeted Jacksonville deserves better, it wasn't that Jaguars fans deserve better, although they're encompassed in this. It's that Jacksonville as a city deserves better. This is the most powerful thing around the country that people associate with Jacksonville right now. Right?
Sure.
And it's deplorable the way that they have played and the product, the results they have gotten over the last decade and a half. It's, you would, and maybe that was 2007 or 2005, you would trip and fall into the playoffs every decade. I mean, it's, and I really wonder what's going on in Shad Khan's mind right now for a guy who went through three managers at Fulham in one season.
I can tell you that, as you mentioned, I was at the game, and I have never, ever seen Gus Bradley the way he was afterwards. And I wrote a long article about this on news4jax.com and on samsportsline.com if you want to read that. And you can also see the entire interview. His emotion has gone from, as he even said last Monday, he was confused and disappointed after what happened in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. Today, he was flat out angry. I mean, he was mad. He was mad.
Should have been.
And he should have been. And I went in the locker room and asked that. And a lot of guys said, yeah. They said, if you're not angry about what's happened, then you're not pulling your weight. And maybe there are some guys who aren't pulling their weight. The guy who was so angry that during the interview he started to sweat again was Roy Miller, who, I mean, he was just like, and Dan Skuta said to me, he just said, look, players got to make plays. Somebody's got to make a play. And, it's 3rd and 15. I don't care if we put pressure on the quarterback. It's still your job to make a play. If the hole is there and it's your job to step in the hole, you're supposed to make a play. Now, I don't know if he was referring to Cyprien or Brown or Thurston Armbrister, but somebody or somebodies are not doing their job, and the other players know it. And that, to me, that's the thing. The other players, you could tell in the locker room now, while they were anticipating guys coming along, Miller was like, look, we're not a young team anymore. And Skuta was like, you're supposed to make a play. Everybody, the hole is assigned to somebody, and if your job is to step in there and do it, you need to step in there and do it, and that's not happening. So the players now know And I think that their expectation is different from their teammates. And I think they're expecting their teammates, hey, you're supposed to make that play. You're not even if you're a rookie, even if you're a second-year player, even if you're a young player, it doesn't matter. You need to step in there and make that play. But until they get some of the players who have those expectations have enough gravitas to hold somebody's feet to the fire, then it's not going to happen.
You know, I couldn't help but think throughout the course of the day as they were giving up long returns and special teams, as they were giving up being gashed in the run game, and as they weren't able to develop much in terms of their own run game. Yeldon had a couple of nice runs, but nothing spectacular. You know, I started thinking back to those three veterans that Dave Caldwell let go when he got here, that we all kind of, you and I anyway, wondered about. And I'm not saying that Greg Jones would still be playing, or that Montel Owens would still be, a Pro Bowl special teamer, or that Darryl Smith. Well, maybe I am saying Darryl Smith is, because he's still playing
at pretty high level.
But when you get rid of when you blow it up and you get rid of basically everybody, now here you have young guys who have, Gus rightly called it a race to maturity. Well, guess what? Not only have they not crossed the finish line, these guys have pulled over to the side of the road and, need the pit crew to come work on the car. I'm going to ask you this question. I have my own thoughts on this, but I want to ask you this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being totally safe, 10 being might be fired tomorrow, where are Gus Bradley and Dave Caldwell on that scale right now as it sits after this game?
After this game, I think they're in the 3-4 pretty safe category. Now, as you mentioned, if not now, when? So you play out the season, and if you play out the season this way, they win 3 games. Yeah. Right? I mean, they win 3 games. They win there. They go 3-13. Now, if they go 3-13, Caldwell will keep his job. Bradley will have to lobby to keep his.
I got to be honest. I cannot. That's optimistic because, and I don't mean the record. I mean both of them keeping their job at 3-13 to me, because you've got, there are a number of different factors that go into a decision with a coach.
You asked me right now.
Yeah.
Now, at 3-13, and depending on the scores of those games and how the games are played, and if they continue. See, because right now I think there's a lot of things that you can point to, as you mentioned, to the Gus Bradley grand experiment of how to be a head coach, and that it has not taken root completely, because I can tell you that the guys have bought in. But he even said, he pointed to the locker room and he said, there's something the matter here, all right? And we're going to find out what it is. Well, perhaps part of that was he should have been looking in a mirror. Because I would love to play for the guy because I'm that kind of guy. You're that kind of guy. But you wonder that when you get 53 guys and they have this empowerment of the players, that if at some point, you think Bill Belichick doesn't tell guys, in essence, hey, you know what? If you guys want to get paid next week, you're going to start making tackles. Because if not, I'll find new guys to do it.
When the players are empowered, there has to be accountability somewhere. And if it's not
100% correct.
And if it's not coming from the coach in the traditional sense, I know there's still accountability, but if it's not coming from the coach in the traditional sense.
And it's not, and it never will if Bradley is ever successful doing this.
Right. Then it either has to come from one of two places. Either the player himself is internally motivated to get better, play better, improve, be a pro, prepare. And if you've got a team full of Puzzlesneys, fine. They will prepare themselves and get the most out of their ability. And there are a few other players like that on the team. I think Allen Robinson, by the way, might be one of those kind of players. Or it has to come from the other players who can hold their teammates accountable, guys in the position room accountable.
And those players have to be stars, by the way.
Yes.
They can't be just your run-of-the-mill guys.
No.
They've got to be stars.
Thurston Armbruster isn't calling anybody on the carpet.
Exactly. And And I do think that part of this, now in his second year, you can ask Blake Bortles to be that. But I'm wondering if he doesn't have that personality, that he's not that guy.
He is so even keel and controlled at press conferences after games, which is when we get the most exposure with him,
right?
In what would be pressure-packed or emotional times. I think Blake Bortles is more corporate than any quarterback we've had here in a long time.
He was after. I mean, what a contrast today when Gus Bradley walked away and they put Bortles up on the podium. I barely listened because, I listened to the first answer and a half, and he basically said all the same stuff he says all the time. Now even keel. I mean, Peyton Manning's about as even keel as they come, but there's a certain demand and expectation from him in practice and in games that if you're not getting it done, he's going to the coach and tell him to put somebody else in there.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you have to be fire and brimstone at a podium after a game in order to have that. It's just I don't think we know yet about Blake Bortles, and maybe Blake doesn't know about himself in this context yet. Well,
I think that I think he's getting better as a player, and that'll help. But he's one of these guys that doesn't exude this confidence. And I think he's too deferential to guys who have a little more experience than he does in the league. He needs to realize that the quarterback is in a unique situation when it comes to leadership, and he's got to grab everybody and move on.
He's got that C on his chest.
That's right. I thought maybe Julius Thomas might provide some of that, and maybe he will going forward. And certainly last year, Senderick Marks was that driving force on defense. But I mean, I think you're right. If not today, when? And there are so many people who have, and my favorite Jaguar fan, last week said, I'm sick and tired of this. I'm not going to waste my Sundays on this anymore. Yet they were back in front of the television today, and they were watching, but they just said, I just can't even stand it. I'm not going to be emotionally invested the way I have been.
Yeah, and that's what my buddy was the same way.
Right?
Where you're not watching it.
That is the worst. That is the worst thing a franchise can have their fans say to them. That fine, you guys do whatever you want. I'll come to a game every now and then. I'll watch it every now and then. But I'm not going to be emotionally invested anymore because I can't count on you because you're not giving me what I deserve. So
that is becoming pervasive. I've seen it a lot on social media tonight after the game. I'm certain I'll hear of it walking around town tomorrow. And
my accountant said he'll never go to another game, and he's selling his tickets.
Well, why would you invest? I mean, honestly, and by the way, this is the sort of thing.
I'd go to a game just like your friend watches the game. I'd go to the game for the entertainment value. Yeah. Being outside, seeing a bunch of people, being in that, being in that situation. But I wouldn't be emotionally invested in whether the team won or not. You're right.
And listen, the Cubs Cubs fans have been that way for a long time,
forever.
Right?
Yeah.
So
right. That's a good point.
But I don't think Jacksonville is a big enough market to be able to survive with that approach.
The Browns. Well, Cleveland's a giant-sized market.
Mm-hmm.
Tampa. Well, they've been inept for a long time. They won the World Championship in 2002, but I mean, there's a franchise that's been around for 40 years, has had very little success. And by the way, if the Jaguar fans were not at that game today, the stadium would have looked a lot emptier than it did in person. Now, that stadium disguises a small crowd very well.
Mm-hmm. With the ship and the way
ship and the seats are painted red, and they encourage people to wear red to the games. And, so, when you look out in the crowd, but I'm telling you, there were probably about as many people at that game that are at Jaguar games. But, I mean, the Tampa Bay area is 10 times the size of Jacksonville.
Right. Tampa top 10 market or top 20, I think, anyway, right?
Top 10 television market. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Both Tampa, St. Pete. In fact, it's It not Miami is the largest market in Florida.
Yeah, right. So, all right. So if you had to place money on it right now, is Gus Bradley the coach of this team next year?
Yes, if they win at least one more game.
One more. Wow.
I just think,
bar.
I know. I just think
for you.
But it's not. No, it's not me making the decision. You asked me to predict.
Yeah.
Right now, if I'm the owner, I have a whole different set of expectations.
Yeah.
But having been around Shad Khan enough, I think that he could be convinced that all the pieces are in place and that they've gotten some bad breaks.
So what you're saying is he could be convinced that this thing is built.
Yes, and that it's built to win, and it just needs they need some breaks for it to go in that direction. Wow. Because for him to, what's he going to do? And I get a lot of people tweeting to me, look, fire Gus already and let Doug Marrone be the head coach. Now, I don't know if Doug Marrone is a good head coach or not. He's been a head coach,
right.
But there is one on the staff. Where do you go? What do you do? How
Yeah, this is the intrigue. And listen, it doesn't make any sense to make the move now. You can't.
But I'm saying even at the end of the year, let's just say they finish 3-13. Yeah. What happens at the end of the year? What do they go hire some other assistant?
I'm glad you asked that, Sam, because I had this thought today.
Okay.
And my thought was, we know that Shad Khan likes the big splashy things, whether it's scoreboards or yachts or what have you, or shipyards renderings. I don't think that he does the same thing again and hires a young up and coming guy.
Agreed.
I think if he makes the move, he's going to hire somebody who's going to win the press conference before the press conference begins.
And I right now, off the top of my head, I got two names that probably would come back, and Shad Khan would give them whatever the money is necessary to be the Jaguars head coach.
Let me read your mind.
Okay.
Cowher and Gruden.
Very good.
And those are the two most obvious big names, splashy names. There are certainly others, and we could think about that and figure out who the other guys who would be that would be. Somebody has to say, well, what about Gus Malzahn? And maybe
been around Gus Malzahn. You been around Gus Malzahn?
No.
Gus Malzahn is a really good guy. He is not yet equipped to coach in professional football.
Yeah,
he's the perfect guy for college football right now.
And I don't know that you would go to college in this situation, by the way. I think you'd have to go to a guy who
Kirk Ferentz. You're finally going to give him an opportunity. By the way, that was our friend Vic. That's always been his favorite choice.
Yes. By the way, Kirk Ferentz, who I'm told, and I haven't come across him, is the opposite personality from Gus Bradley.
Yeah, of winning a press conference. That is true.
Yeah. So, we'll see where it goes. So last question on this job security thing, and it's a little bit of a segue for just a moment, and that is, who has better job security right now, Gus Bradley or Jurgen Klinsmann?
I'll tell you what, I don't know. I watched that game, and I was expecting it, to go to PKs, and something happened there, and you could call it a fluke play, kind of a back kick, and a guy volleys it in, but for some reason, the guys on the back line just didn't react the way that you expect them to react.
Not at that point in the game.
At that point in the game, right? It's a desperation time of the game, and they just didn't react to it. And is that coaching? Is that who the coach selects? Is that the selection process?
Player selection is a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big part of it. So more job security, still Klinsmann, because now they got to do what? They got to go to Honduras or go to Guatemala instead of automatically qualifying under the Confederations Cup.
Yeah, and I mean, I had a rough week for the teams that I
bet.
Follow. Bowles loses on homecoming. Right. By the way, Lake City Columbia played extremely. That's a really good team.
Yes, they are. They were benefited by 2 interceptions for touchdowns.
Yeah, but they were the better team. I mean, there was no doubt.
Oh no, absolutely.
And the Armada get clean sheeted in Carolina. Team USA loses. The U.S. men's national team loses. Jaguars have the game they had. And then tonight, the Royals have fallen down 2-1. So
last night I'm watching 3 games at one time with our good friend and colleague, Matt Kingston.
Mm-hmm.
He is a massive Gator. So the Gator game is over and Florida's won. So he's happy.
Yeah.
So at this place, this establishment, we asked them to put the Mets game on, the soccer match on, and the Florida State game on.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 3 televisions in front of us. We're watching all 3. Within the span of about 45 seconds, Florida State wins, USA Soccer loses, and the Mets shortstop has his leg broken by Chase Utley.
Yeah.
Matt just looked up and said, "Check, please. Yeah. We're leaving," because he hates Florida State, and they ended up winning. And he said, "What? How is this possible that all this could go wrong in 45 seconds?"
No.
Nice, solid, clean play by Chase.
Imagine this. It could have been worse for you. If you were a Bulls graduate and a Jaguars fan who went to Georgia and was a fan of the Armada and the U.S. men's national team,
that would
you had a really bad weekend.
Yep. And you have a friend who went to Southern Cal.
Yeah.
That would not be a good weekend.
No, it would not. It would not.
Yeah, very good.
All right, that'll do it. JU, by the way, is undefeated. So
they are. Stated goal of going 11-0, and just like when the University of Florida won back-to-back national championships and stated that they were coming back to win it again, which I think is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in sports. When you state that, when your stated goal is to go undefeated, and you are that 5-0, you don't have to start saying, well, now we just need to win out or whatever. I mean, they're trying. I think Kerwin's done a good job in getting those guys focused on every game. That this is our next step toward where we want to be.
Yeah, and best start in school history. And considering what happened last year, having to give up the championship and all those things, very good coaching job by Kerwin Bell.
Yep.
And having his son Cade as the quarterback, who knows that system like the back of his hand, who's been a starter since his freshman year. I remember they can get into the national playoffs. Now, there's no margin for error. They're not going to be an at-large team almost certainly, but that'll be something to follow as the season goes on.
Absolutely.
All right, that'll do it for the Sam and Cole podcast. Next weekend's got to be better, doesn't it? It can't be much worse.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For that guy we just mentioned. Brought to you by Champion Cycling and 3 locations.
Arlington, the beach, and Mandarin. Stop by and see Phil or Brian at the beach, or Jim at Arlington, and they'll take care of all your cycling needs from beach cruisers to high-end road bikes. Doesn't matter. You need them fixed, they got a tremendous parts and service department at all 3 locations.
And by the way, if you we haven't had this conversation, but I'm going to bring it up now. You follow Sam on Twitter at Sam Kavaris. Follow me on Twitter at Cole Pemper. We might, don't hold me to this, we might Periscope the podcast after next week's home game. So you can follow it on Periscope as well as getting it after we edit it and upload it for audio. But we might be able to go live from Mobile Unit 1 on Sunday.
Very possible.
Yeah.
Very possible.
All right, that'll do it for the Sam and Cole podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week here on the Sam and Cole podcast.